Welcome, one and all, throughout time and space for this episode of Weebs on the Weekends, the podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode will cover the second week of May 2022, after which we will give our thoughts on whether to resurrect or rebury the 2012 anime franchise Muv Luv Alternative Total Eclipse, or simply known as Total Eclipse. My name is Sam Martinez. I'm a part-time weeb, full-time automail mechanic. With me, as always, is my co-host Jay Johnson, part-time weeb and full-time English language sensei. Now, Jay, I know that both of us have seen Doctor Strange, but I have to... Sorry. You wanted to talk Doctor Strange. So, thoughts, comments, concerns?
Oh, it's just because we mentioned it last week on the episode that I was kind of not misleading about my viewing of it, but is that I was very much in the camp of I haven't seen WandaVision, so I didn't know how it was going to parallel into Doctor Strange, because at the time there was like this not mix up, but there was a production kind of misplacement of the Spider-Man No Way Home, WandaVision, and Doctor Strange, where you think they're going to be interconnected because there's a bunch of multiverse stuff going on in No Way Home, and WandaVision seems to be like a parallel universe, or seems to be something was wonky because you see Vision in the trailers, so like what's really going on in that show? You don't want to spoil that at all, but very much to my surprise that Sam Raimi, who is a known horror director, came on to the project, and he's mostly known for his Evil Dead series. He also did Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3. Did he do all three?
Yes,
but specifically,
he did all three.
Right, yeah, because there's a lot of not horrific, but there's like horror-like scenes, especially in 2, where like Doc Ock is like being operated on and his tentacles come alive and start dragging around doctors. But to say that Doctor Strange, or the Multiverse of Madness for this one, is very ghoulish in how Sam Raimi approaches the horror is very much appropriate. It feels very much like the first horror movie in the MCU, and I was very surprised that it wasn't Blade, which we're getting in about 2 years. I believe that's when Blade is scheduled for release, but very surprised that this was the first horror movie, and as much as I don't like horror, I can definitely say that it felt very well done, that the multiverse was not explored that much. Like, so the title kind of feels misleading. They do have something in the trailer that you see where they falling through multiple multiverses or universes, but not really fleshed out in the film. Also, the madness part I wasn't like too keen to, because like when you say madness, you're like, oh, you're going to be objected to like cosmic horrors, but that wasn't the case either. And it's not really a Doctor Strange movie either. So I think on every front it's like kind of a weak entry. And I would
from what you said, it's like everything about the trailers, everything about the title. The title itself is misleading. Name it something else. It shouldn't even be titled Doctor Strange. It's just like, and Doctor Strange, or featuring Doctor Strange, should be part of the title.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I think there's a lot of positives to the film, and I would put it on the bottom tier of my MCU movies. Like, it's been a very weird past couple of movies, with the MCU being Black Widow, then the Eternals, and now this. So I'm kind of interested to see where this phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going, because it feels like it's going in the direction of Secret Wars. If anyone wants to look up some comics about the Secret Wars.
There's supposed to be a Disney TV show about the Secret Wars.
Oh, good. Okay, so maybe the MCU is going to have its own version, because like Miss Marvel is the next TV show, I believe, and that's going to be a little bit different than the Miss Marvel that we're used to. But I very much like the introduction of America Chavez in the film, and her abilities and how it's visualized, and well as not to get into any spoilers, but just to say that the movie does go in directions I was not expecting. And definitely stay tuned to the first of the end credit scenes. Maybe not the last one, but if you're a big Sam Raimi fan, you're definitely going to get a treat at the very end of the movie. But Sam, how about you?
I very much liked it, despite, and mentioning how going back to what you said earlier, how this was you were surprised that this was the first horror film, that you thought it would have been Blade. I think it works, because especially with Sam Raimi as the director, because with him doing the Evil Dead, it was more of the mysticism, spirituals type horror, whereas Blade, it's more of the hack and slash horror, say like Michael Myers or something else like that. So I know that the New Mutants was supposed to be the true first horror film that the superhero genre was supposed to get. I didn't get a chance to see it. I wanted to see it, but I heard that it wasn't all that good. I'm gonna have to give it a shot just to see how it was done. But I really like how the horror aspects were shot in this film. And that's one thing that I tell all my friends or anybody that I talk to, is that when you're going in to watch this film, think Evil Dead. Don't think it's going to be your typical Marvel movie, because they really push the envelope, and there are times where like, I'm surprised that they show this. Isn't this movie supposed to be PG-13? And because there are definite scenes where people are being under great duress, and whereas in the previous Marvel films, like in Infinity War, Infinity War and in Endgame, there are these giant battle scenes. They are treated more like scenes of war, where people obviously die and are left by the wayside. But you're you're kept going by the momentum of the fight. You don't sit and revel in it, mainly because you don't really have time. Whereas in this film, again, you see people in great duress, you sit and you revel in it. And it's unnerving, and it's supposed to be unnerving. And I really like that. Like, it was just enough for this film, because you were able to get a sense of the stakes and what was happening. I would say I liked how how they kept the dynamic between Doctor Strange and Wong, because even in the Spider-Man film, we saw that Wong is the Sorcerer Supreme now. He has the title because Steven was in the blip. They kept that in this movie, and it improves their dynamic so much more than what we got in the comics or in the animated TV shows, where Wong is essentially Doctor Strange's mystic butler, right? In this movie, they're on equal footing, and you can see that Wong is given his due credit. Like, he earns that title, and which I really appreciate in the film. And it also causes Strange to grow in his person. They sort of beat it on the head with in the movie, but for me, it wasn't so obvious until I sat and thought about it, that for most of his life, he was a surgeon. And to be a surgeon, you have to have that aggressive type A personality. You're always right, that sort of thing. And having that in the back of your mind, you realize just how much Steven grows in this film, which I really appreciate. So, yeah, it's when you go into this film, definitely reconsider whether or not you want to take your kids, but know that it's going to be a bit of a wild ride. uh, is there anything else that you would like to say on the film, Jay? Aside from you feel slightly confused, twisted, and used?
Just to close, it's like I didn't laugh once, but I was definitely jump scared a couple of times, because specifically there's a scene where Wong is exploring this location, and out of the darkness pops a creature, and I
Yes.
jumped. I was like, wow, was not expecting that. But it happens out through the movie, because Sam Raimi is kind of the expert at misdirecting the
Oh, he's
audience's
so
view.
good. He's so good at that.
So it definitely feels like a Sam Raimi film, which, hasn't been the case for a lot of Marvel movies, except for like Taika Waititi with Thor and James
Mm-hmm.
Gunn with The Guardian. So like this would be another entry in like specific director's stylization.
Oh, most definitely. And I would appreciate if they start using more directors like him, or even if they bring him back on for, I forget his name, for Blade. Oh my god, he would do great. It would be fantabulous. But let's start getting on to the bit of the news. I think the first news story still has to deal with the Magics. I mean, again, you said that you've gave us your final thoughts on Doctor Strange. All right, awesome. So time codes in the description, and we are going into the news. And our first bit of news story that we have, as I said, it's bit of a transition from our talk of the mystics. We have learned that there is going to be a musical for Magi, the Labyrinth of Magic. And they have revealed the cast for the main characters Aladdin, Alibaba, and Morgiana, as well as some of the lesser characters in the first arc, really. And I think this is the same guy who voiced him, but the genie is going to be voiced by Toshiyuki Morikawa. I'm trying to look in his resume to see if to see if he voiced Ugo-kun in the anime, which would actually be pretty cool. So I just found that it was pretty interesting because it seems like Magi has died down a little bit in popularity, especially after the sequel series, The Kingdom of Magic, had ended a few years ago. So I wanted to pick your brain on this one, Jay, as you are more of a musical aficionado than I am, on whether or not this is a due musical for a series that seemed to have waned in popularity recently.
Yeah, it's not that it's waned in popularity, but it's funny because Magi ended in 2014, so that was 7 years ago. And of course, it had its prequel series. I forgot its proper name, but it was basically centered around Tales of Sinbad. It focused on Sinbad as a character. But yeah, and I think it has to do with one. Well, personally for us, we're going to be talking about Magi because it's its 10th year anniversary this year. But also, it feels very not convenient, but it feels like a lot of elements are working together because the author has their second work that they're most known for. Orient came out this year, so it feels like the popularity of her writings are just in the public consciousness. So like Magi has like a pretty good standing in the anime community because it has like a pretty high My Anime List score. It has like a decent following and publication for its 37 volumes. It had 50 episodes. It does feel very much like a very good introduction anime. There's nothing too crazily anime, quote anime about it. It does delve into like Arabic and the story of Sinbad and Aladdin and like the actual original origin of those Saudi Arabian kind of tales. So it's like very culturally sensitive, I guess is the nice way to say that. But it's really interesting. The power dynamic in the system is very hard set, so like you can really latch onto it. The villains are very well written. Like there's a lot of heartfelt moments in it with certain characters and their arcs. So it's like a all round, well rounded series. So yeah, a musical. I mean, we have musicals based on like volleyball animes, so it's not like something that's new. But like if you're going to parallel to something like us in the West kind of had like that Aladdin scene where he like enters Agrabah for the first time. So it's like something akin to that. It's like, well, of course, there's going to be parallels that you can draw to the narrative and to the musicality that can happen in the musical. So yeah, for its first stage play, I think I'm pretty excited for it.
Awesome. And I just finished up looking, and it turns out like Toshiyuki Morikawa is actually the voice of Ugo-kun from the anime. So the fact that they got him back for the stage play is very exciting, and I'm glad that you had mentioned Sinbad because looking through this article at first, I was kind of miffed that because they have the pictures of a lot of the other support characters, but they didn't have a picture of the person portraying Sinbad. I'm like, oh dang, so they're not going to even get to the point to where you even see Sinbad because Magi, even though like it seems like a short series, it's pretty long and its arcs are pretty lengthy. Sinbad doesn't really show up until the end of Magic of the Labyrinth, and so like there's a lot of stuff that happens. But they do have Sinbad casted, and I am so glad because Sinbad is pretty much the cinnamon roll, or at least the badass cinnamon roll. What trope would that be? Like everybody likes him, but he's a badass in his own right. I would like to think that he is a badass cinnamon roll, but I'm not sure if that's a thing. But still, it would be pretty cool to see him or how they portray him and some of the magics on stage. But aside from that, we will be going on to the next bit of news that has to do with the supernatural a little bit. And we have gotten the first release of Mob Psycho 100 Season 3. The series, I forgot when the series is supposed to be debuting. It originally aired in 2016, 2019.
This October.
Sure. It's going to be this October? Yes, you're right. It's going to be premiering this October. It was originally announced last year, 2021, but we will be getting it this fall. And Jay, what are your thoughts on have you been following Mob Psycho any at all?
It's one of my favorite animes of all time. I would probably put this on like my top 10 list. And it's very odd because it's something like everyone agrees upon and no one really talks about because it just goes by so quickly. It's only been 25 episodes, which is very odd. It feels like it's been in the discussion of, high tier anime for so long. So like you said, started this first season in 2016, followed up with the second season in 2019. And it's based off of this very well received, highly acclaimed manga series by the same mangaka as One Punch Man. And like One Punch Man's kind of fell off because of the switch between studios from its season 1 to season 2. But Studio Bones has been covering Mob Psycho for both seasons as well as during this next season 3. And it's very much in the camp that this is going to be the last season because the manga is only like 15 or 17 volumes long.
Really? So the manga is completed, or is he just on hiatus for Mob Psycho? Because I know One Punch Man is still going.
The manga is completed, so it only ran for 5 years. Yeah, it's like a very odd case of excellence coming out of like this very short work, and everyone has found it very beloved, and it even ranks among like some of the. It's like made the list of best anime of the 2010s, which I'm sure we'll talk about eventually. Probably when we're halfway into this decade, we'll come back and talk about like the top 10 anime of the 2010s. But yeah, Mob Psycho is something I really care for. And I'm glad no one in the anime communities like really, or the manga communities spoiling it. I've seen like very small traffic on spoilers for it because what the PV shows for the season is like a lot of things that they tease in the opening of season 2. So it's like a lot of that's playing out, and it just shows that Studio Bones was like planting seeds and like foreshadowing things that they knew that they were going to cover. So I'm very excited for this. And when we get to our fall watch list, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to have to put this on my list. I usually shy away from sequel series or sequel seasons, but this is definitely probably my number one, if not Chainsaw Man. I'll see how I feel. But yeah, this is probably my number one for the fall season.
Nice. And after seeing the trailer, it seems pretty interesting that, or at least like where they're going for Mob's development, because it seems like with this season, he's having his existential crisis where, because in Japan, they mainly have you fill out this form. It's like, oh, what are you going to do, after school? It's like, are you going to go on to university or are you going to go to work? And it seems like this is the first time that he's having to come to grips with that. I think the first season, and you would correct me if I'm wrong, like the first season was him trying to improve himself so that the girl he likes can notice him. And then the second season was more or less him trying to maintain the relationships that he had gained in the second season. And that's how I feel, as though like this third progression is going for his character. Would you think that that's a fair assessment, or am I off base?
No, that's perfect. And it's odd that like it's a really human story about just a kid that doesn't belong trying to find people. It feels like so shonen tropey, but it's well done in the sense of like you feel his embarrassment, you feel like his anxiety, you feel like the emotional weaknesses that he has a character. So it's like very empathetic to how it's written and shown on screen. So yeah, first season he explores, trying to develop himself. Like he joins a bunch of dude bros and
the Body Improvement Club. I love them. They're the best.
yeah, they're so wholesome because like they step in to defend him even though he doesn't need defending. And yeah, like you said, like second season is more of it maintaining those relationships, but also there's world domination going on in the background. So it feels very much like part 4, like of JoJo. It's like there's these extraordinary elements going on in this very human story. But yeah, season 3, like you said, is like the idea of like, oh, now that I've established myself, what do I actually want, I guess, or what do I actually want for my future instead of just stabilizing myself. So I can talk forever about Mob Psycho, but yeah, for sure.
It's funny that you had mentioned part 4 of JoJo, because I just thought about the line where how he just wants to live his normal everyday life, but he's still just like thrust into the world of fantastical. But on to our next bit of news story, talking about the little bit of the world of the fantastical. We have learned that in commemorating the 30th anniversary of Sailor Moon, they have announced that there will be a 2-part anime movie sequel adaptation of the Shadow Galactica arc, which is the final arc of the manga. And both of the movies will be titled Bishojo Senshi Sailor Moon Cosmos, and they are scheduled to air next year in summer of 2023. And again, this franchise was beloved by a lot of people. They had a retelling of this franchise back when it was on its 20th anniversary. It was rebooted in 2012, and this adaptation was more faithful to the manga, whereas I feel as though the original one probably had more fillers, because it was back in the day of Dragon Ball, where fillers, Dragon Ball and Inuyasha, where fillers were supreme. Again, just covered a lot of the stories, and it has been in and out of the media since then. And Jay, what are your thoughts on them giving such a big, such a big work for the 30th anniversary, giving us a 2-part movie about its final arc, or at least about the manga's final arc?
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head when saying it's been in and out of media for like the past 2 decades. Because one, like we grew up, we're 90s kids, so like we were exposed to Sailor Moon like right when it was published, or not publishing, but being released, because the manga just came out. As soon as like the manga came out, it was approved for an anime adaptation like immediately. So like we're familiar with Sailor Moon, and then what you were talking about with the reboot that ran for only 2 years was called Sailor Moon Crystal. And then in 2021 followed up with Sailor Moon Eternal, which I think we reported on last year about the Sailor Moon movie. But yeah, so. It's very interesting that like such a like known series. It's like it was Dragon Ball for boys and Sailor Moon for girls, essentially. But yeah, there's like several movies. There's some OVAs that have been happening, but there's only 2 main adaptations or anime adaptations of this like 40 volume series. So don't really have much to say about it, but I'm glad that the whole story of Sailor Moon is finally being told properly because it's being done by Toei Animation as well as Studio Dean. So they're going to give it its due treatment, but I think it'll be nice that there'll be like a box set for Sailor Moon finally, that the story that's beloved by many, like you said, is going to be told finally.
I would say it's kind of fortuitous that Sailor Moon has come back as it did, just recently, mainly because I had saw this meme of Moon Knight where it was Moon Knight in a sailor uniform. And now it's got me thinking, I wonder how many of those crossover cosplays we would see at the event at the film. I just feel as though that would be like the best thing ever. Um, but it's just fairly interesting because I've never really gotten into Sailor Moon, as you said. Like back growing up, it's like, oh, that's for girls. Like I don't need that. And literally, the lyrics is "Finding love by daylight, fighting evil by moonlight." It's like I kind of just want to watch the moonlight parts, like when I'm like 7 or something like that. So, but with all the popularity that it's had, I kind of want to give it a shot, or at least a 3-episode test, just to see what the hubbub is about. But I'm glad that they're able to celebrate their 30th anniversary. And talking about another project that is celebrating their anniversary with a movie, we have gotten some more promotional videos regarding Penguindrum's second film, or the film that they're going to be coming out with recently, regarding uh, a retelling of Penguindrum. It's going to be dubbed Recycle of Penguindrum, and it's considered a compilation film. And they also gave the ending theme song for the second film. And essentially, this film is supposed to be a quote unquote re-edit of the 24 episode anime. And I say quote unquote because there's also supposed to be more original works or drawn scenes coming into these franchises. So it seems like they're just taking the original story and shifting it a little bit, because even in the trailer, we see another female character that is wearing the penguin drum. That is not the I forgot what her name is, but it's not the main character's sister. And it's just been fairly interesting after watching that trailer. Jay, what are your thoughts on this new project that's supposed to be coming out? I think, yeah, that's supposed to be coming out this July.
Yeah, we had a episode about this last year where, well, we had a special guest, Emma Cipriani, who is an illustrator, talk about the character design of it, and I think we were pretty much on opposite sides about how we felt about the series. But yeah, I pretty much put it on the list for last year to talk about its 10-year anniversary because, one, a lot of people say it's one of the best of the decade, but two, because it definitely grounds itself inside of a real world incident that happened in Japan, and don't want to give too much away about it, but just, pointing us to go check out that episode. We talked about this for about 2 hours about, but yeah, like you said, everything is a compilation remake film where there's going to be new sequences, new characters, and I think they're doing it because they know how unaccessible the original 24 episodes are, or how hard it is to really get what they're going for. It's very metaphysical, or it's very high order thinking that you can't really find enjoyment out of it. But it is going to be broken up between 2 films. So the first film is Your Train is the survival strategy, and the second one is I Love You. So they're coming out on 2 different dates during the summertime. But the most interesting thing about it is that a studio Brainbase did the anime series, but Studio Track is doing this movie, and they're known for doing Sara Zenmai with Studio Mappa from a few years ago. So same kind of stylization of crazy, wacky absurdity, but they're mainly a studio that does like cooperation and assistance. So it's very interesting they're handing this off to a studio that's not really known for anime production. So I don't know what that means. It probably means that those in-between scenes are going to be, they were brought in for those in-between scenes to connect major plot points or to give more fleshed out characterization of stories. So it's not a complete retelling, it's not a complete remake, it's just like a re-edit, technically.
Yeah, and as you said, like the studios, they're not really known for some of their anime sequences, so maybe it would give them enough experience to sharpen their teeth, or at least to showcase some of their skills in those transition sequences. So that's actually very cool. And as you said, hopefully the story would be more digestible, because it seems like they're going to be hopping back and forth in time, but with the way that the show was, it was already chaotic. We'll just have to wait and see how the series is and how the fans accept it or don't accept it. And with that, we will be going on to the main anime of discussion today. So, time codes, descriptions. We are going to be discussing the anime of choice. I had misspoken last time. I thought this was your pick, Jay. But after watching it, I'm like, oh, of course, this is my pick. It is Muv Luv Alternative Total Eclipse. And Jay, have you been exposed to this anime franchise at all? Was this your first time hearing about it?
So, funny story. Well, not even a funny story. It's just like, so as you know, I'm a man of culture, and
yes,
the the original edition or the original version material of this story is a adult game. You know, in Japan they call it eroge. Just means erotic video game. So I knew Muv Luv from that name alone, and I was going into this. Wow, Sam, very cultured thing to pick for us to talk about, and had no. So the original genre of the virtual novel, the game, is romantic comedy, mecha. So I was going into this expecting that, and it's totally not that. So I have many thoughts to thought about, but yeah, I knew about the name alone, but I did not know the deviation that was Total Eclipse.
That's fairly interesting, because looking back at the franchise history, very much like you said, it was based off a visual light novel, which is known as Muv Luv Extra, and then there was a sequel series to it that was Muv Luv Unlimited, that was considered an alternate timeline coming of age story. And I'm sorry, Muv Luv Unlimited, yes. And then after that was the sequel, Muv Luv Alternative, which is another alternate timeline, but it has to deal with an alien invasion. So it's like, oh, lovey-dovey, somewhat sexy stuff. Oh, lovey-dovey. Oh, existential crisis sort of things. And then next thing you know, alien invasion. It's like, how did we get here? And it was just fairly interesting that you had mentioned that mechs were involved in this the entire time. I thought that the mechs were probably just introduced in the alien invasion stuff. But yes, that is really the sum. So with this series in particular, Total Eclipse, it's supposed to be an alternate telling of Muv Luv Alternative. So dealing with the alien invasion, but instead of following the main characters from there, we are following characters that are directly linked to the development of the mechs that are used in Alternative, and it's supposed to be thought about in tandem or in congruence with storytelling with Alternative, very much like how some of the Gundam series that we've talked about, I think it was maybe it was like Eighth Mobile Suit. Eighth Mobile Suit was supposed to be in tandem with another Gundam franchise that was happening at the same time, but we're sort of following the grunts there. And if I got that wrong, my our previous guest Ellis would definitely chew me out for that. So we'll see if I'm right about that later on. But back to Muv Luv. In this historical fiction, we have Earth being invaded by these creatures known as Beta back in 1973. And we're following essentially the downfall and the reshaping of the landscape of the world. And we follow the daughter of the person who developed these mobile suits, which are known as TSF, Tactical Surface Fighters. And throughout the series, we're supposed to follow her and the pilots that are deemed worthy enough to use the more advanced versions of these suits in their fight against the betas. With the studios that made this series, we once again see Studio Satellite, a studio that we've talked about in the past, who've done works such as Fairy Tail and Hellsing. We also see a studio known as Ixtel. It's written as IXTL. I don't know how it's pronounced, but they worked on works such as Schwarzenmarken and Total Eclipse. Again, this was based on a visual novel. The genre for this is action, drama, sci-fi with the themes such as mecha military, and it is rated R, and we can watch this series on Crunchyroll. But to watch this series in particular, you would have to type in Total Eclipse, because if you just type in Muv Luv, you would just pretty much get the series that premiered last year in 2021, which is Muv Luv Alternative. So, with that out of the way, Jay, you said you had some thoughts.
Yeah, that's an understatement. But yeah, like you said, like the Studio Satellite, and we were kind of doing a studio profile this year because we also talked about their production on Symphogear a few episodes ago, I guess, and they also did AKB 0084, but I think we pulled that from the schedule because that's a very odd thing that we can't really talk about under an hour, or a production that we can't really talk about in a short amount of time. But yeah, it is wow, where to start. These first 3 episodes, again, we're giving it the 3-episode test, but the first 2 episodes are part 1 and part 2, and I left the episode 2 not talking about it just yet, but leaving episode 2 with the feeling of, oh, this is Edge of Tomorrow. And I was like, wow. I kind of fell in love with it after that, because like All You Need to Kill is the manga that Edge of Tomorrow is based off of. But All You Need to Kill is like one of my favorite mangas of all time. It's basically a one-shot, or it's like a limited number of volumes, but it's something I've read a couple of times over and over again. It just really catches me because of like the mech aspects in it, is dealing with some time travel elements. There's no time travel in this show, but it does leave you in the sense of the gruesome nature of war, which a lot of but a lot of mech series don't really take like the most direct approach to it.
Yeah.
But this does. So like you said, it's an R rating because the mechs will get covered in the blood of the betas. Just, there's like gruesome death scenes. There's like just violence on the battlefield that, you know, is close up and forces the audience to watch it in a very like, oh, you like watching this, you freak kind of way, which like very much feels like very much, again, I was going into this thinking it was going to be a romantic comedy with mech pilots, and like, oh shoot, that girl's getting torn limb from limb.
She's getting murderlated.
Yeah, and like, not to say that, you know, I guess I said I came away loving it after the second episode, but I was like, oh, if they can do that in this, then they can definitely do a faithful recreation of All You Need Is Kill. So I was like paralleling those kind of two feelings, is like handling the mech aspect, handling the gruesome violence, handling the character development and the twists. Because in the first episode, they're like, hey, we're just a bunch of cadets and we're friends and we're going to conquer the world and save people. And then in the second episode, again, spoilers,
they
get wiped. They just get wiped. I mean, the main heroine, who is Yui, she's the only one that survives, but her team of like 4 or 5 friends just get murdered throughout the episode. And it's just weird because in the third episode, we get to the next main character, or I guess the true series main character. So it's 24 episodes in total. And the new main character in episode 3 is Yua, I think?
It's Takeru.
I
think that's his last name.
Yeah. Well, I listened to the English dub, actually. So Yuta Bridges is how they...
Bridges.
Bridges. Yeah. Said his name, and it was very odd listening to the dub of this. But yeah, it's wild that I've never really seen this in anime before, that they just murder like the characters they introduced to you in the first episode, and then switch to a whole new main cast in the third episode. And it was wild because, like, oh, this is what I've been missing from mecha for most of my life, I guess. So, like, coming away from like all the gruesome things, which I really don't like, and I watched through my fingers, but I was like, I appreciate how they structured the 3 episodes more than I guess I liked it, or just like pure enjoyment of it. It was like, oh man, this is really craftily done, and it was like, oh wow, this came out of a light novel, and there's like a couple of manga series, and then the balls to go with a side story, or to go off with a spin-off and not even go with the first main story. Like, literally the main story of Muv Luv focuses on Yui and her growth in like those between the first episode and the third episode. And it's like, wow, we're going to go R-rated, switch to a typical shonen male lead Gundam pilot or mech pilot, and have her off as like a supervisor. It was like, man, this is like inside the same 3 episodes. They started with a sequel series. I was like just applauding, I guess. So I have a lot more things to say, but Sam, did you like it at all as the mech guy?
I like the points that you brought up. In regards to they're choosing to switch up the main character, and I'm sorry, Takeru is the name of the guy from the main storyline Alternative. I that was when I had realized that when you type in Muv Luv, you have to be specific with Total Eclipse. Otherwise, you just get information from Alternative. Because I had accidentally had that in my notes from earlier. But in regards to Total Eclipse, like as I'm watching this, I remember watching Gunbuster, because we had talked about we had our anime spotlight on Mecha series, and for that I had watched Gunbuster. And Gunbuster is a big influencer of a lot of mech anime, especially Gurren Lagann, with how they do the dynamic posing and the strong female characters. I would say it's sort of not fair to this series, because as I'm watching it, I'm constantly comparing it to them, because as you said, it's like, oh, it's a whole bunch of cadets. It's like, okay, cool, same thing that Gunbuster did. Like, one thing that I realized too, because with Gunbuster it wasn't necessarily a typical anime, it was more of like an OVA, so the episodes were longer, so you were able to sit and dwell with the characters. You were able to see the cadets actually grow in their training. Whereas in the first episode, we have the main female protagonist. She's a cadet, and she's running into these different types of obstacles that she runs into at school, because she's part of a main family, and then there's a secondary family member that goes to her same school that feels some sort of way. And we essentially just get this montage by the end of the episode. It's like, okay, they're friends now, I guess. Whereas again in Gunbuster, like with that sort of thing, because you had enough time to sit and dwell into it, you can see how that relationship came to be. And I would have appreciated that a little bit more. I do like how realistic the second episode was, but I feel as though that the character interactions, that the character ties in the first episode, they weren't really strong enough for me to really be emotionally invested in the people that did end up dying. For instance, at the end of the second episode, I am a little mad that the person who survived simply because of plot armor. She is the daughter of the person who built the entire, or at least is on the cutting edge of the TSF. So it's like, oh, of course she's going to survive. But I do appreciate the fact that you get to see the emotional turmoil and angst that she has at the end of episode 2, so that when we see her in the beginning of episode 3, she is much more stern, she's much more strict, and whenever she runs into Bridges, who everybody lovingly calls Top Gun, she basically shits on his parade and is like, "You're not good enough, and I don't deem you worthy enough to even pilot my suit." And it's just like, okay, cool. So this is conflict. I'm not going to lie, in the beginning of the third episode, and this was before I realized that Muv Luv was a series based on romance at all. I felt some sort of way because when we're following Bridges, it seemed like he started getting his own harem in the first episode that he shows up in. And that is so jarring from what we've seen in the first 2 episodes. It was a little off-putting to me. I guess like having that conflict at the end of the third episode, if I were to keep watching it, that would be my reasoning for watching it, to see why she doesn't hold Bridges in high enough regard to even pilot her suit. I guess because like with her, like because with Bridges in episode 3, we see how he handles giving out orders, and it is a little bit unconventional, but it puts people in maybe unnecessary risk. Whereas we've seen the main character, she's had actual combat, and my favorite scene so far is when we seen her instructor, how he comes in and he gives her and her comrades who had survived up to that point, he gave them kudos. He said, "You guys did good. You followed your training," and basically says and wishes that he hopes to see them as the soldiers that they would be, as he's being the last man on the line holding off the horde of the beta. Oh my goodness, it was such a good scene. Even so, like, that emotional tie that we had to the instructor, I wish that they were able to do that more with some of the other characters. All that is to say, wrapping up my final thoughts on it, it was good, but I kept comparing it to Gunbuster and how Gunbuster was able to do things better. But I need to remind myself that Gunbuster was more of an OVA, and they were able to dedicate more time per episode to give me the things that I was looking for. So I would say, thinking back on it, it seems like Total Eclipse did do the best they could with what they had. And I would say, like, there are times, just like in terms of animation, Jay, you can tell me if I'm correct in this or not, but like with some of the hand-drawn scenes, they were a little bit janky, but then whenever the mechs were on the screen, I'm like, bro, okay, so that's where all the money went. It's like, because the mech animation was still up to par, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, for sure, because I wanted to talk more about this as well, because I kind of need like a alignment chart of mechs in my mind, because we talked about it, and again we did a profile or a spotlight on mechs, but like, how does this fit into like the larger world of mech design? Because I always see like mech design as like indicating of the technology involved around it, because I think you said this in the very beginning, that it's like a historical piece with counting, because they start off with like the moon landing, And
Yeah.
oh yeah, there's aliens on the moon, and oh no, we just alerted them to our position, I guess.
It was weird because it's 1970s, right? And they mentioned that we're getting attacked by aliens from Mars, but we're on the moon. It's like, how do you even know that they're from Mars? I'm sorry. It like you said, it's just a chronoclasm, I think is what it is. It's just like it seems like verging timey-wimey stuff happening at the same time.
Right, yeah, they kind of just sweep that over because it's an alternate timeline, so like how technology kind of progresses is kind of like a little bit different, but basically the same, just in a very specific way. Because it's always vibe with me or rub me the wrong way about how fast the world goes to mechs in that kind of design. That's kind of why I like All You Need Is Kill, because they do basically just exoskeleton.
Yeah, exosuits.
Yeah, exosuits.
And we see some of that in the montage, right? When the aliens are invading, like we see the slow progression of humans getting to mechs because we see humans in exosuits, but they're just getting run through like toilet paper.
Exactly, and that's to talk about the beta's designs are so creepy, just horrific not JoJo, but Joji Ito kind of horrific.
They remind me a little bit of the creatures from Dead Space.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, just all mouths and like just disgusting appendages that kind of feel human-like, but then there's like some bug-like creatures, and there's like different classes. As evading forces, like they have different armaments or specialities to fight against. So again, like giving us a good sense of like, oh, why it's so hard to kill these things, or why are we losing so poorly. So atop all of that, I guess, is the fact that I think this is something that you mentioned, is like in that third episode where Bridges is like proving himself worthy, is because everyone else feels like, oh, if you've never been on the front lines, why do you feel like you're entitled to command, essentially? And he gets into, again, talking about a little bit of the third episode a little bit more, just the idea like, oh, I have to prove myself to these people. And it's kind of like understandable why Yui, again, the previous main character, is like weary of him, because one, he doesn't have battle experience, and two, like she's seen the horrors of war. So it feels like genuine conflict, but then it's like, well, if he's a tactical genius, which he shows in that battle, then all he needs is real world experience, or real frontline battle line experience, to validate his claims to being the best. And that whole team is like made of international pilots, which again goes back to like the Symphogear kind of comparison, where it was the same idea of the academy having a bunch of mixed nationality pilots. And so you listen to the sub, right, Sam?
Yes, I watched the sub, yes.
Okay, so they do a very bad, I don't know if it was a French, Italian accent with the guy that called him.
Oh, Macaroni? Yeah, he was supposed to be Italian.
It was wow. But anyways,
it was bad.
It was kind of bad, but yeah, there's like,
was it like Super Mario bad, or
I'll send you a clip, but I don't really know how to explain it. It was like, are they trying to be offensive? But
it's me, Macaroni.
Yeah, but yeah. So again, like I think the weaknesses, like you mentioned, are kind of clear. But again, if they're trying to just push that out, those first two episodes, as a flushed out memory or a flashback, or to subvert expectations, like, okay, we don't really need to know about the canon fodder to really care about them, since we're going to forget their names. I don't even remember their names. There's like 5 of them, and all I remember is Yui, because she comes back 3 years later.
I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of funny, because it was funny to me that during their practice exercises, one of them was known to fly a little high, and the instructor was always on her. Who was always on her butt. He's like, "Yo, you're flying too high. You're gonna get hit by a laser, right? But by the type of beta that can shoot lasers, right?" She even was like always going through like the taped markers and stuff like that. And in actual combat, what happens? She's the first one off by a laser, and I'm like, Oh my goodness, that was that same one, wasn't it? It's it's horrible, but
yeah, they don't really do the thing of like showing the
yeah.
pilots in their cockpit as they're blowing up or getting killed that much, which kind of attaches you to the characters in their dying moments, so like who's really dying. Because like the mobile suits or the FS TF, oh my gosh, TSFs,
TSF.
yeah, are like kind of blocky in their design, which I was trying to wrap around back to the idea of a chart, because I don't know where that kind of mobile suit model comes from, because they're just like giant Lego blocks, more Gundam.
They reminded me a lot of the mech design from Breakblade.
Oh yeah, I should have made that connection. For sure.
It's like they're a mix of Armor Core and Breakblade.
That's fair, yeah, because in Breakblade, those mobile suits are like ancient technologies essentially. So like their designs are very like archaic. So yeah, like for the first iteration and what Yui's trying to design to make it more of like the Gundam mobile suits that we're used to, make it like streamlined and like more slick in their design, is very noticeable, like you said, about the development of the technology. But overall, like if I was going to write this off in the categories of to resurrect or rebury, oh man, that's rough. Because I don't think the harem elements or the romantic elements are going to be that strong. Again, the team is kind of 50-50.
Yeah, I would say it's 50-50, because I was surprised that Macaroni was a part of the cast to begin with.
Right, yeah, for sure. But yeah, for sure, that I don't feel like it's going to go in the romantic comedy direction. And for how much of the twist or how much I enjoyed it just came from the surprise of murder lurtling in episode 2. It's like really on the fence for me, but I'm going to have to say that if a modern version of the story, again, you talked about the new edition of it last year in 2021, I would probably check that out rather than continue this. So I'm going to say rebury.
It's odd enough that you had said that, because I was thinking about having it reburied to begin with, but talking with you, like I kind of want to resurrect it, but I'm still a little bit on the fence, because as I'm just thinking about stuff to see what we can what they can go into in regards to the story, because we run into a character that runs into Yui as Yui's trying to go to the main office so that they can have the mission briefing before they go into that sortie exercise with Bridges and the new pilots. We run into a cadet that mentions something in regards to color. Like she was able to look at Yui and say, "Oh, you're lost," without Yui even saying a word. And she said, I was able to tell by your color." So it seems like we're going to be, and going with this franchise, we'll be seeing something akin to a new type that has some sort of psychic powers or capabilities that may pop up on the battlefield, or came as a result of exposure to the betas, or just by experimentation on the UN's due to the UN's handiwork. So it would be fairly interesting to see where they go with that. And I would be a little bit interested to see how Yui's and Bridges' relationship is, because even in Bridges' introduction, he was assigned a certain mobile suit, but he ends up switching with another pilot simply because he was assigned to. So maybe maybe Yuri. Yeah, and as I was saying, it would just be interesting to see what type of new type equivalent that they would go into. And Jay, I would say once again that with the alternative series that came out last year, just keep in mind again, like that's considered the main storyline for the whole Muv Luv series. So that story would maybe a little bit different from Total Eclipse. Like I would say that because the games were focused on romanticism and things of that nature, alternative may be more focused on the romance. It may be the it may be the mecha anime you were looking for. But I just wanted to remind you, just in case, you go in there expecting Total Eclipse and then, getting Love Hina or something like that. I don't know. I just threw a buzzword name out there. But as far as Resurrection or Reburying, I'll probably have to go back to Rebury, because I had with Gunbuster, I liked it that it focused on the female mech pilots, and we don't really get a whole lot of female mech pilot stories that doesn't overly sexualize them. I mean, granted, the female characters are overly sexualized, but so are the male pilots as well in regards to the suits that they have to wear. But I feel like there was just something, some extra special thing that they were able to bring to the table with making it more, with putting them in more realistic settings rather than cutesy magical type setting like we would see in Strike Witches or something in those regards. So again, I hate that I kept comparing it to Gunbuster, but Gunbuster was sort of my gold standard. So like, unless it was comparable or better, I can't really give it a resurrection. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's a Rebury for both of us.
It's a rebury. Yeah, it's a rebury from both of us. Surprised but not surprised? I don't know. I was kind of hoping that I was going to be able to say to Resurrected by the end of this episode, but thinking back on it, I can't. Just because of the issues that I've had. They dealt a lot with it's just right there on the border. Like, they just needed like one other good thing and I would have been okay to resurrect it. But that's a resounding rebury from both of us in regards to Muv Luv Alternative, Total Eclipse. And Jay, do you have any final thoughts before I go on to the anime announcements for the next few episodes we got?
Not really, because it's, again, like, something that does strike me again in the year 2012. We talk about a lot of like high profile anime that kind of shaped the anime scene. And for this to come back in 2021, I'm like, where are these anime production committees getting their ideas of? Because the video games, like, again, these have multiple installments in the video game scene across from the past 10 years. But yeah, most recently was in 2016. So that was like 5 years out from the new edition or adaptation of the anime. So it's like, who's just cherry picking these visual novels from like years ago and like bringing it forward into the future? So, it kind of gives you hope to any mangakas that did work in the past to say, oh yeah, you can always come back and do an anime. But yes, this with Symphogear has been a very weird mix to talk about for 2012. So very odd year for Satellite.
Very odd. Maybe it was their experimental year. But for our next anime we will be reviewing will be Kuroko no Basket, with a special guest that Jay will be inviting with us. And after that, we will be going on to reconvene with another anime of ours known as Excel World. Now, Jay, with that being said, what have you got for us today?
All right. Again, being the educator that I am, I thought I would correct a mistake that they did in episode 2, because they used the term scorch earth, which isn't really something that is applicable to alien species, I don't think, because the betas, I don't think, have sentience really, or have like some kind of higher motivation other than to eat humans. So, education for military terminology. A scorch earth policy is a military strategy that aims to destroy anything that might be useful to the enemy. Any assets that could be used by the enemy may be targeted, which includes obvious weapons, transport vehicles, communication sites, and industrial resources. However, anything useful to the advancing enemy may be targeted, including food storages, agricultural areas, water sources, and even local people themselves.